everyone. I'm Anna McLaughlin. I'm the Program Director for Transportation Program Management here at AASHTO. I want to warmly welcome everyone to webinar 70 in our Transportation Asset Management webinar series is sponsored by FHWA and AASHTO. 70. I feel like that is cause for celebration. That is a long series of webinars, and I'm really excited that you could all be here today. Today, we're going to feature speakers from SpyPond Partners, HDR, Virginia DOT, and Indiana DOT, sharing information and systems best practices related to transportation asset management. We've presented webinars in this series every 2 months going back to 2012 on a variety of topics in asset management. Again, we just keep adding to the good knowledge sharing that we're doing through these webinars. For more information on this webinar series, if you want to keep coming to them or visit past ones, you can go to tam-portal.com. That's tam-portal.com. From there, click events in the main menu to register for upcoming webinars. You'll also find archives of previous webinars and links to videos. Slides from today's webinar will be posted on the site as well. This site is home of the AASHTO Subcommittee on Asset Management. For information on the subcommittee, you can visit tamportal.com. I really want to drive through that website, tamportal.com, and click on Subcommittee on Asset Management under the Community menu. If you have suggestions on future webinar topics, we would always love to hear them. Or if you have questions for the presenters during today's webinar, you can please submit your comments or questions using the chat feature here on Zoom. We will answer questions during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar, where we will invite audience members to unmute, share their views, or ask their questions during the group discussion session at the end. Until then, we hope you'll be careful to keep your audio connection muted so that our presenters are not interrupted, and we thank you in advance for that. And now we are actually going to have a recorded message from our good friend Tasha Clemens of FHWA.
Welcome and good afternoon or good morning to everyone joining us today. I'm Tasha Clemens, and I represent the Transportation Asset Performance Team in the Office of Infrastructure of Federal Highway Administration. Federal Highways, in cooperation with the AASHTO Subcommittee on Asset Management, is very pleased to sponsor this webinar series. We feel it's a great way to bring people together around a series of important topics and to connect with the asset management community. For today's webinar, we will focus on the TAM Guide, Chapter 7, Information and Systems. This chapter covers processes and tools for TAM data collection, management, integration, and reporting. Our speakers will share practices that addresses Lifecycle BIM for infrastructure, Virginia DOT Guardrail inspection, innovations, and Indiana DOT's AI project bundling for improved TAM results. With this webinar, I am pleased to say that we have reached the 70th webinar in our series. And Federal Highway Administration's Transportation Asset Performance Team is committed to increasing knowledge and capabilities at transportation agencies across the U.S. So I do encourage you to visit us online for more information and to gain access to available resources. The address is shown on the screen. And finally, I just want to say thank you for your participation. I'm very certain you will enjoy today's presentations. And so now I would like to turn it over to Hayana Park of SpyPond Partners to give an overview of today's webinar, to review today's agenda, and to introduce our guest speakers. Hayana?
All right, thanks, Tasha. I'm Hayana Park with SpyPond Partners, and as Anna mentioned previously, the purpose of the webinar series is to share lessons learned, ideas, knowledge with the asset management community. As you may remember, this year we are featuring this convergence of the digital TAM guide being completed with the asset management survey that was conducted at the very end of last year, where we took the priorities identified by the survey with the topics that are in the TAM guide and are using it as a way to both share what's in the TAM guide, and especially some of the new content that's in the digital guide, along with practice presentations related to the topics. All right, so for this webinar, the primary learning objectives are to learn about the TAM Guide, Chapter 7, Information and Systems. Next, highlight how data supports TAM activities and importance of well-managed data and integrated information. And then featuring best practices from state transportation agencies regarding TAM data and systems. And of course, share lessons learned, ideas, and knowledge. For the agenda today, we started off by hearing from Anna McLaughlin and Tasha Clemens. I'll introduce each of our speakers between each presentation, but in brief, they are Will Duke from Spy Pump Partners. Will was the lead author of the TAM Guide Chapter 7 on Information and Systems, and he's going to provide an overview of this chapter. We'll next have Chris Williges from HDR, who will be presenting on BIM for project delivery and asset management. We'll then have Wenling Chen and Matt Barret of Virginia DOT, who will be sharing information about Virginia DOT's Guardrail Inspection Program innovations. We then will have Louis Feagans from the Indiana DOT, who's going to present about AI project bundling to improve TAM results. Time permitting, we'll have an open group discussion at the end and also answer questions that you may have. That you, as soon as you have a question in mind, please enter them into the Zoom chat feature and we'll take them in the order they're entered. We'll make the slides and video available after today's webinar on tam-portal.com. And one final note to our presenters to keep things moving along on schedule. I'll chime in to remind you when you have a couple of minutes remaining in your allotted time. All right, let's move on. So now we'll hear from our first speaker, Will Duke from Spy Pump Partners. Will is a partner at SPP, where his focus has been on improvement of DOT decision-making through implementation of asset and data management programs and data-driven performance management systems and processes. Prior to joining SPP, Will spent 10 years working with the Virginia DOT, where he served the department's pavement and traffic asset management programs. Will.
All right, thank you, Yana. So let me share my screen here real quick. Hopefully everybody's getting that. As Yana introduced, I'm with Spy Pump Partners, and I had the pleasure of leading some of the updates to the TAM guide, specifically the TAM digital guide, which is available online, and even more specifically, Chapter 7, which is the chapter on information and systems for TAM. So a little bit of an orientation to the guide. You know, it has a framework which recognizes really 4 foundational functions of TAM, but it also recognizes that you can't perform TAM without both or your organization and people, as well as information and systems. And so that's why Chapter 7 is so important in that it presents a lot of really valuable information about how you can better use information and systems for transportation asset management. So specifically, you know, what's in Chapter 7, it's organized into 5 sections. One of them is a brand new section only available through the digital guide. But the first four are part of sort of the legacy guide and have also been updated in their own smaller ways. And of course, data, information, systems, these are all essential to asset management. Asset management is a data-driven activity, and so it's really important that your asset managers have data that they trust and that they understand and that's accessible to them in order to perform those functions. We also know that collecting data is not cheap and maintaining it is not cheap. As is, it's expensive to develop and implement and maintain, information systems that basically make that data useful. And you don't have unlimited resources. So agencies really need guidance to help kind of fine tune how they invest in their data and information systems and balance sort of the return on those investments with the other very critical investments that you need to make through your asset management program. So that's why I'm a big fan of this chapter and hope you all, with this introduction to it, will check it out. So the guide is that the chapter is organized in a way that it helps you really answer some really critical questions. So, like what decisions do you need to make? What sort of questions do you need to answer in an asset management program? What sort of data do you need to defend those decisions or answer those questions? And what value will each of those different data elements that you're considering collecting, what value will they add? What sort of accuracy, detail is required in that data to make it useful? When is it too much? When are you overspending on it? And how regularly should you update it to make sure that it's useful to your end users? And then, the data is great, but if it's not integrated, made accessible, useful to your, targeted users, what good is it? So again, how do you do that? So this chapter strives to answer all those questions, and it certainly can't do it all on its own. There's a lot of embedded resources and links to, detailed research and guidance. And I kind of hope to walk you through at least some of the new material that's available in this chapter. But there's also a lot of really important legacy information that remains useful today. So it's not just the new stuff that I'll be touching on. There's a whole lot of other stuff in this guide that I'd encourage you to check out. So the new stuff, of course, there's the new section 7.5, which I'll talk a little bit about. There's new research out there and new practice examples that have been cited and made sort of accessible to you through the guide. There's checklists and how-tos that kind of take these really complicated things that you need to do and distill them down to sort of the basic steps of the process and make sure that that's useful and easy to consume. There's also new ways to engage with this information. We have videos, we have audio, sort of an audio book approach where you can actually get an audio version of the guidance and listen to it rather than consume it through print or digital format. And a fun new feature that was added are these knowledge checks. So at the end of going through the guidance, if you want to make sure you understood it, you can kind of quiz yourself and see whether you took away all the key points. And the guide also references this new TAM data assessment, which is sort of a separate piece of research that's available through AASHTO in the AASHTO TAM data guide and supporting TAM data assessment tool. So that is highlighted in the guidance as well. And that can be a really useful tool that we'll talk a little bit more about later on in the presentation. So I'm going to kind of run you through some of the new stuff that's available, assuming that many of you may have already taken a look at this guide at one point or another. So first in the first section of chapter 7, there has been a substantive update where we added a whole new subsection on that AASHTO TAM data guide. So that's a really cool bit of research that was developed through the NCHRP. It's available also in print and digital format, and it's even supported with a web-based tool that helps you conduct these TAM data assessments, which can be really powerful ways to evaluate whether your TAM data and information systems are up to meeting your needs, or if there's some gaps how you might prioritize and tackle improving those. So I think that's a really cool new resource. I think a couple webinars ago, maybe it was the last webinar actually, we heard from a couple agencies that had used this recently to help them kind of plan for improving their programs. There's also a whole new section, section 5 of the chapter. This is focusing on sort of future applications of data in transportation asset management. So a big one that we'll hear about a little bit more later today is building information modeling. You know, this concept that you can take data from your asset management systems and use that to directly integrate into your planning processes for your projects and your investments, then connect that to design and construction and ultimately back into operation and asset management. And in that way, make sure that you always have sort of this living, most up-to-date, sometimes more detailed information than would be available through traditional data collection means, and hopefully better serve your TAM program and its needs. So BIM is a really exciting new part of what DOTs are doing with their data, and that's explored in this section alongside a sort of really detailed research effort that explored BIM and its applications in TAM. So I definitely, for those of you who are interested in kind of pushing the limits, I definitely encourage you to check that out, especially if you're find yourself interested in some of the later presentation material that you see on this webinar. But beyond that, we do cite a lot of new reference materials and research that have come available over the last several years. So there's a whole bunch of new research that's out there, and it's kind of consolidated and made available here. And so as you can see, BIM is one of the topics that has been top of people's mind. There's also those assessment that I was talking about, as well as a wealth of other things. So I definitely encourage you to look at the research and resources section of the guide and kind of see what's new. Of course, each of those is a product in and of itself and can go very deep into some really interesting areas of data and information system usage for TAM. To kind of bring that up a level and make it more accessible, there are these practice examples sprinkled throughout the new guide, the digital guide. For example, the Virginia DOT used that TAM data assessment tool to explore its pavement management system and its sort of functionality and whether it was meeting their needs. And so that's an example of a DOT who leveraged one of the products or one of the some of the research that we're citing. And so we packaged that up and made it sort of an accessible reference for you through the guidance. There's a number of how-tos that are sprinkled throughout, a lot of them, for example, touching on these various assessment methodologies that help you kind of evaluate whether your data is working well for you. So, for example, there's a how-to on how to perform a data management maturity assessment, where you can kind of evaluate how you manage your data and whether that's an effective sort of structure and where you might need to advance. There's how to perform data value assessments and improve the value of your data. Of course, this is really important if you want to determine how to make better use of existing resources, or potentially if you're considering a new investment in a new data asset. How will you get the return on investment there? There's that TAM data assessment that I talked about. And then there's some really cool stuff around BIM. How do you evaluate the maturity of your organization with respect to BIM implementation? And how do you identify a future state that's going to serve you well? As well as how do you evaluate the return on investment for investments you're making in BIM? So these are some really cool techniques that have been distilled down, simplified, made easy to at least understand at the highest levels through these how-tos. And then, of course, we reference the more detailed research that's behind it. So there's a lot out there. Maybe you don't want to read it all, so check out the videos. There's videos, including references to some past webinars in this webinar series that were, you know, useful in understanding how information and systems can be used for asset management purposes. So those are available. And then, as I mentioned, well, sorry, I'm one step ahead here, but there's also these new cross-cutting topics that are sprinkled throughout the guidance. So there's the framework itself, but then there's topics that actually cross multiple areas of the framework. So for example, data management, analytics, and visualization. Of course, there's components of that in the information and systems chapter, but there's components of that in the organization and people chapter, as well as throughout the core functional areas. So this kind of looks across that and helps you figure out how to better manage, analyze, visualize your data for whatever your TAM program needs are. So I think that's a really cool way to take a look at things in a way that's sort of separate from the more rigid structure of the the framework itself. And then, as I was mentioning earlier, you can engage in the material also through audio. So if you're driving home and you want to make use of that commute time, consider downloading the chapter or even the whole book and the whole guide and kind of listen to it as opposed to navigate it by other means. So consider doing that. I think that's a cool way to kind of take this podcast type approach to learning about TAM, and in particular in this case, TAM data, information, and systems. And then after you've done all that, test yourself. See if you've learned the key points. There's these quizzes embedded throughout. You can take them, and they kind of help you figure out if there are any areas you need to go back and revisit. Maybe you got a little distracted on that commute and stopped listening, and we're paying more attention to traffic. That's a good thing. But if you miss something important, this will help you figure that out, and then you can go back and revisit that section and relearn that material. Kind of my closing slide here, I will also say that there's a lot of other tools out there. For example, that TAM data assessment tool, they're all referenced throughout this. This is meant to be sort of a one-stop shop that helps you find all those other resources and engage with them effectively. So I really do think the TAM data assessment and the data management assessments are examples of that. And so there's a lot of powerful stuff out there that I encourage you to check out. And I hope that you find that the guide is a useful way to kind of embark on that. So with that, thank you. I'll certainly stick around and look forward to questions. I'll pitch it back to Jana and the following presenters.
All right, thank you, Will. Our next speaker is Chris Williges from HDR. Chris is the director of HDR's Economics and Statistics practice. He has more than 30 years of experience conducting transportation planning, economics, engineering, and strategic assignments for public and private sector clients. Currently, he's working with agencies on program evaluation and development that considers full lifecycle capital, operating, and maintenance costs as part of asset management. Chris.
Great, well, thank you. So I'm really excited to hear on the last presentation about the updates to the TAM guide. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some practical research that we completed in the last few years. And I think you'll see a lot of ties back to what Will was talking about. So just kind of a quick overview of what I plan to cover. So I'd like to give just kind of a quick overview of the research, talk a little bit about what is BIM and some use cases that we conducted, and then talk a lot about how we looked at making the business case for incorporating BIM, whether that's for project delivery or asset management, and a tool we developed that'll help you make that business case. And then kind of end with some best practices and lessons learned. So the work we conducted was funded by the Turner Fairbanks Highway Research Center. It was under TFRS 02, which is an NCHRP type project. Like NCHRP projects, we had a panel that oversaw the research, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. The goal of our research was to try to figure out how to evaluate and then communicate to stakeholders the business case for BIM deployment. And we were interested in BIM deployment for project delivery, but also for asset management. And really the first question we asked is, are there benefits from BIM that can be quantified? And are those benefits large enough to justify the investment in BIM? And then if so, what things should we be looking at to maximize those benefits? So the team we put together, my co-partner on this, Alexa Mitchell, oversees our BIM practice. I oversee our economics practice at HDR, so it was a good pairing. But we also had John Messner, who is a professor at Penn State and really an expert in implementing BIM technologies, particularly for vertical infrastructure. But as you'll see, we adopted a lot of the things that we've seen in implementing BIM for vertical infrastructure, where we can use it for horizontal infrastructure in transportation. As I mentioned earlier, we had a panel. Morgan Kessler at FHWA was the chair of that panel. We also had a lot of support by Lance Parva at WSP, who was the chair of that panel. And as you'll see, we had a number of different DOTs that served on the panel as well. So we had a very sort of standard NCHRP type process where we had an upfront phase where we do some research, and then phase 2 where we implement that research. But the key to our approach was we conducted a literature review to see what's out there. And we found a lot of literature on horizontal infrastructure, not as much, on vertical, but not as much on horizontal research. And this is where our case studies really came into play. We solicited participants from a number of different state DOTs and other agencies to help us identify from their own implementation of BIM, what kinds of benefits were they seeing? And these case studies actually serve two purposes for us. One, and you'll see this in our final report, we have stories about individual agencies, what they've done with BIM, how they've used BIM, what are the benefits they've realized. But it also helped us build this tool. It gave us rules of thumb of the type of benefits you would expect to see from BIM. One of the other outputs of our project was a multimedia plan and a multimedia package. And for those of you listening on this webinar, you might find parts of that multimedia plan very useful. We have presentations that you can make to stakeholders, more technically focused presentations, and also more management or executive level presentations that talk about what is BIM, what are the benefits of BIM, to try to help you make that business case within your own organizations. So let me take a quick step back. What is BIM? Well, you could think of BIM, or building information modeling, as a shared digital representation of our assets to facilitate design, construction, and operational processes. So really a technology or a database. But it's not just a database or a set of tools, but there also are people and processes behind those. And you need to think about the lifecycle management of your assets. And it's a very collaborative process. And some of the things that we learned touch on things that Will was talking about, which is really understanding your process and the level of maturity of your organization in order to really leverage the potential uses and the real power of BIM technology. So we looked at BIM in many different aspects of your infrastructure lifecycle, whether you'd use it as part of planning and design, construction, or in asset management, and making that full tie. One of the outputs of our research was a PDF document. This is a snapshot of the PDF document, but it's interactive and it shows different parts of your asset management data flow. And actually, there are different images here that you can click on, and it talks about what are the parts of that data flow using BIM data and how that fits in the overall process. The other thing is we looked at developing use cases. Where would you actually take BIM and apply it in your infrastructure delivery, whether that's part of the core project delivery or the asset management? And we also identified some potential extensions beyond what you might do as sort of basic BIM implementation. But as you become more mature as an organization, what are different use cases? As part of the research, we also developed a plan for implementing BIM. And a key part of that plan is having a steering committee that will oversee the design of what you're trying to achieve. In the report, we cover not just that first part, but other parts as well. For example, looking at the information exchange requirements, really defining what the BIM data entities are, what are the properties, who's responsible for that data collection, and what's the idea data format. And then we also look at the operational phase. What's the data you would need for the maintenance tasks? What kind of data do you need to collect? And what do you need for asset inspection? So another part of our project was helping to make that business case. And so when we thought about making this business case, we really thought about what are the different sorts of things that would impact your ability to get benefits from using BIM. Again, whether that's for infrastructure delivery or for asset management. And so part of what we looked at was the agency context. How big is your agency? How many assets are you managing? But also, what's your maturity? And how bought in are you to leveraging that BIM technology? And then there are sort of foundational things like, well, what kind of BIM software did you purchase? What are the capabilities of that BIM software? How do your data linkages work? All of these things affect the outcomes you'd get from implementing BIM. So the way we defined making the return on investment or the business case of BIM, we used a benefit cost methodology, a very standard approach of comparing the benefits to the costs of BIM. But one of the things that we did was a little bit different than a standard benefit cost analysis is we developed this 4-quadrant diagram. And what we thought about was your benefits are really defined. The types of benefits you can achieve are defined by the functionality that you have purchased and used in BIM and support within your organization, but also how well you integrate BIM into your practices. And so as you move to the right and up in this diagram, you're able to start maximizing the benefits that your organization gets from BIM. Another thing that we included in our research, and it sounds like we have some information about this as well in the TAM guide, is thinking about your level of maturity, how much you've adopted BIM and you're using it as part of your decision making. Then we looked at what are standard costs for implementing BIM. And we thought about the software and the hardware costs, but also the staff costs that you need to make up front, but also the ongoing costs. Just once you've implemented BIM, you need to invest in continual hiring and training of staff. And then also you need to update your subscriptions on BIM technology and keeping it up to date. We identified many different benefits, and I'll show in a second a chart that shows some of the benefits we identified of BIM technology, but we grouped those benefits in terms of in-house agency cost savings, project cost savings that are attributable to individual projects, overall efficiencies of staff, and then also benefits you would see out in the field or on the roadway that users would experience. So I mentioned earlier our case studies. We had 6 different case studies where we talked to New York State DOT, Connecticut DOT, Utah, and then we also talked to Denver International Airport to understand their experience with BIM. Another thing that we did as part of a case study that was kind of in a unique part of this research is we formed a panel of subject matter experts, because we did find in our research that there were a number of holes where we could find benefits for BIM. And we used our subject matter experts to give us a range of potential impacts. And that range is included in the tool that we developed that is available to you as part of this research. So this table shows the types of benefits that we identified for BIM, whether that's reduction in physical storage, improved worker safety out in the field, better design efficiency. One of the biggest benefits that we saw were avoided change orders. And that's because using BIM technology allows you to truly understand your design a little bit better, communicate that design intent. And so when you go out and you deliver your project, you just do a better job of that, and it avoids those change orders. In our research at the end, we developed a tool that you could use to communicate the business case for implementing BIM in your organization. The tool allows you to operate in 2 different modes. One where you can do a very simple analysis using default values found in the tool, and one that you can provide very detailed input from your own organization. So for example, you could put, rather than using an average salary for an engineer, you could use your salary for your engineers, put that in. So you can provide very detailed data in this tool and then investigate what the impacts of BIM would be. It also gives you an opportunity to dig into those, the literature review and the case studies, and be able to see the types of benefits and the ranges of those benefits that we found. The tool will also calculate a benefit cost calculation based on the input that you provide. And it will break it down by the different benefit categories. This particular example, you see it has a very high benefit cost ratio of between like 3 to about 8 to 1. Very high benefit cost ratio, and it's because you're talking about investments in technology that actually have relatively low costs and deliver high benefits. So a few of the challenges that we identified through our case studies that really make BIM adoption difficult is insufficient training, resistance within the organization to change, software evolving over time, and the lack of standards. And so the key to BIM implementation is training, making sure you establish the standards, having collaboration and dedicated leads. So let me just leave you with one last slide. Here are the things you can get from our research. We have a final report. It's available online. If you search for CRP Special Release 4, there's that multimedia package I mentioned, as well as that Excel toolkit. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chris. And our next presenters are Wenling Chen and Matt Barret from Virginia DOT. Wenling is currently an engineering program manager with VDOT's Traffic Operations Division. In this position, she oversees the Asset Engineering Program, which aims at advancing the management and project deliveries of traffic and operations assets through lifecycle-based data analytics, optimize maintenance and operations strategies, and innovative decision support tools. Her previous experience also includes 6 years serving as the Traffic Monitoring System Program Manager and 8 years supporting and managing VDOT's maintenance and operations needs assessment program with their asset management division. Matt is a deputy program manager at Virginia DOT. He has been with VDOT since 2006, and his previous roles include senior transportation analyst and civil engineer in highway construction standards and special designs. Prior to VDOT, Matt had project management experience with McCormick Taylor and AECom. I'll turn it over to Wenling and Matt.
Thank you, Yana. Can you hear me okay and see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. So in the next few slides, Matt and I will be speaking about our recent experience with VDOT's Guardrail Terminal Maintenance Inspection Program. I like that Chris had shown a structure of the team who work on his project. I think Matt and I got the talking assignment this time, but this program is a wonderful example of a cross-functional collaboration of a team. We're speaking on behalf of a group of colleagues who work so hard and creatively to make this program a success. So in this presentation, I'm going to provide some high-level context and background, and Matt will speak to the specifics of excuse me, program implementation. So I wanted to start with a little bit background about VDOT and our traffic operation asset program. VDOT maintains the third largest network in the country. We're behind only to Texas and North Carolina. As of 2023, we have just under 129,000 lane miles of roadway. And across this network, there's a large portfolio of traffic operation assets and programs that is worth about $6 billion in replacement value. So a couple of years ago, we did a order of magnitude estimate for how much does it take for us to maintain and operate our assets. And then compare with that with our funding level. Of course, a lot of assumptions get applied to that analysis, but by and large, it's very safe to say that our spending level or funding level puts us behind the industry good practice level. And that's why we have found ourselves constantly turned towards some approaches that will help us live within those limited resources. And those approaches include applying data-driven, lifecycle-based approach to help us optimize maintenance operation investments. We continuously improve our process, policy, and technical standards. And we also try our best to leverage technology to improve efficiency. And in order to do that, we have to engage cross-functional teams to get the skill sets that's needed for us to adapt to the changing field condition and the changing environment with the new opportunity of technology. This Guardrail maintenance inspection program is an example of a lot of those approaches that apply in project delivery. So as a little background, one of the key drivers to why we start this program was a increasing national concern that Guardrail terminal have been found to not being installed, excuse me, or maintained per manufacturer specification. Some of them do not stand well to crash or crash testing. There has been intensive media interest in Guardrail safety related issue, and many other states have also planned to perform statewide review. And VDOT recognized the safety implication of those maintenance issue, and our leader and kind of commit funding to allow us to perform boots on the ground assessment of all statewide inventory of terminals. And there are a few category of issues that we're targeting with this program, which Matt will touch on a few slides later. But I want to talk about at program level, there are several daunting challenges that the team faced at the initial design phase. So just to name a few, scale and urgency, we have over 150,000 terminals across state maintained network. And this project is set to complete in 3 years, which is a very aggressive schedule. And in this inventory, we have more than 30 different types of terminal products. And each of those have different hardware installation requirements, specifications, and to inspect those products, it will require an inspector to have extensive field experience to be able to tell those different types of product, and not to mention to be able to identify some of the mismatch issues where hardware component from different product get mixed together into one site, which made it not safe. And on top of that, there is also safety concern. And we just based on the sheer volume of this operation, and there is a statewide footprint for us to send our workers out to the road, and that's not taken lightly because that's a lot of exposure. So we want to keep the inspection operation to under 15 minutes to manage the exposure. And if we go beyond 15 minutes for the inspection, then there need to be additional work zone safety measures, such as shoulder or lane closure that's applied. And then at this scale of project, that's going to trigger kind of going to be cost prohibitive for us to do. And then the other challenge was the data quality. We're getting data from 9 different districts collected by 20 different contract crews. How do we make sure the data quality is assured? So we turn to the industry, look into the market to see what kind of help we can get. Unfortunately, at the time when we start this project, the technical guidance within the industry is very much lacking. And there's also extremely limited pool of qualified inspectors. So the question is, how do we, within a short time span, to build this industry capacity, build the knowledge and skill needed for us to complete this project? And from every angle, it looks like a mission impossible. But fortunately, this story has a happy ending. So within the first 6 months of our initial design, the team was able to come up with a very innovative approach, which allowed for a 2-man crew to complete all the needed assessment within 15 minutes. And then 6 months into the statewide rollout of this implementation, we did complete over 60,000 inspections successfully. So what made the impossible possible, I believe, were a number of technology-driven innovation that the team came up with. I just want to highlight a couple of those. One is sort of a unique set of kind of mobile app and BI tool that our GIS based kind of uniquely a tool that we configure to streamline the process to help improve the safety and efficiency of the inspection operation. So that's one. And what's more interesting is that we were able to simplify the inspection of operation to from requiring the inspector to identify the issue, the actual mismatch problem, to narrow it down to asking the inspector just to collect 17 observable factual information about those Guardrail terminals. And then from back in the office, there were computer algorithm created to process those data and let the automatic process to be able to determine or flag the mismatch issue. So that has been a huge time and resource saving for us and proven to be a game changer. In the interest of time, I will just stop here as a spoiler. I'm going to turn the floor to Matt, who will tell a real good story about the detail of the project.
Thank you, Wenling. I'm going to try to share my screen.
Okay, let me turn off.
Gotcha.
Did I stop? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you have the floor, Matt.
All right. And hopefully everybody can see my screen. I'll turn my video on.
Yes, we can see it.
Yes.
Okay. And for some reason it won't advance. There we go. Okay, so we started the program concept for the inspections of the Guardrail terminals back in about February of 2023. And so in about the first 4 to 6 months, our objective was to evaluate the different alternatives of what we could potentially do, what the cost would be involved in that, and try to get some executive approval on a path forward. Wenling already mentioned, it was a huge undertaking because we have over 30 different types of terminal products out there on the highway that we would have to inspect. And we have to develop some type of reliable method to basically evaluate these and collect the data. Then we moved, once we were able to set which path we're going forward with, we went into the development of the different tools that we would need. Obviously the mobile app that we developed to do the inspections, but also a lot of supporting documentation, pocket guides, field ID manuals, and those sorts of things. And then of course, training. And then we went into what we call a pilot program, where we went out in the field and used these tools, including the mobile app, to try to make sure that it was working smoothly, collecting everything we needed to collect, and that the data was obviously reliable and trustworthy. So we went through the pilot process. Once we were happy and made some final tweaks to that, to those tools, then we went into what we call the implementation prep, which is develop the workforce. And as Wenling mentioned, we have a very, very limited pool of qualified inspectors that can do this type of work. We're talking about looking at 30 different types of terminals. There's very few people out there that would know anything about these types of terminals. So we're relying heavily on the app, but also we developed a training program that would certify each individual inspector so that they know how to use the app and they know how to use the tools that we've provided to collect the data, and in the end have reliable quality data from these inspections. And then the year one implementation, monitor the data collection, coordinate all the activities in the field, and we're working actively in just about every corner of the state every single day. So there's a lot of coordination with a lot of different firms that are doing the work. And we were able to slowly ramp up our inspection teams over a number of months. And within 6 months, we were already at a point where we were collecting 4,000 inspections every week. And then ultimately, as of this month, we crested over 100,000 terminals that have been assessed in that 10-month window. So now we'll look a little bit deeper into those. We were tasked with coming up with some different options. Our executive staff basically said, come up with some options, what we could potentially do. We looked at doing what we called a detailed on-site inspection, which is basically every single nut, bolt, and screw that you could possibly review on these terminals. However, what we found was the time limitations that we had, being the 15-minute time window. We weren't going to be able to be inside of that. And so what that meant was that the cost of that option one was going to be way too high. We weren't going to be able to afford to do that. So then we moved on to what we call a limited scope or limited on-site inspection, where we did some very specific items that we felt were the most important, and get as many of those items in the inspection and still come in under the 15-minute window. And then, of course, option 3 and 4, we went into some very basic, what we call a windshield assessment, which would be, literally drive by and try to make some assessments just looking out the window of the vehicle. And then option 4, we get into like a virtual assessment where you're leveraging some type of video log, whether it's Google Street View or something like that. So ultimately, we chose option 2. So the methodology and supporting documentation, pocket guide. So we developed the mobile application for the inspection. At the same time, we developed what we call the pocket guide, and the pocket guide is really just the paper form of the mobile app. So if you really wanted to, you could take the pocket guide and it's in printed format, and we supply those to all the inspectors. But you could take the pocket guide and do old-fashioned paper form type inspection. But the pocket guide also includes a lot of photographs and information for the inspector to show them, what's expected of them during the observation of the individual terminal. So in order for this inspection method to work, we have to generate what we call we have over 30 different products out there on the highway that we maintain. All of them have different requirements as far as the different types of bolts they use, the lengths of the bolts, the types of rail that they need to use for each product, the different types of posts, and the list goes on and on. And there's a lot of different possibilities with these components with each product. There's no way we can train anybody to remember or know all of that. So we developed the matrix, and as the inspector is entering the information into the mobile app is essentially running an algorithm and checking against the matrix. And if the matrix or if the algorithm determines that there is one of these items that doesn't match the matrix, it's going to flag that as a problem. And in most cases, we call that mix and match, but there could be other problems there as well. So the app is basically doing a lot of the work. The inspector themselves are just basically recording what they see. They don't need to be an absolute expert at the terminal. It's just they go out there and we say, what do you see for this post? Do you see this length bolt? Do you see that? And what do you see recorded in the app? And let the app basically do the work. So the field collection app, it's a mobile app that we created through ArcGIS. And it's a smart form type app, which is very, very helpful because it auto populates some of the selectable answers for the inspector so that they don't really have to type anything. It's just click on the next question and the form comes down and they can select the answer that applies for that question. We also require photographs, a minimum of 4 photographs, and the app has a built-in photograph application within the inspection form. And once they select the type of terminal that they're inspecting, the app is very dynamic in that it will generate questions based on the type of terminal that they're inspecting. So we have 30 different types of terminals. However, the questions may change slightly depending on what type of product they're inspecting. So one of the very first things they have to do is identify what type of terminal they're looking at, and then the app will then react to that and generate the questions that we want answered based on the type of terminal it is. So it's a very dynamic app in that sense. Okay, so we also we were collecting all this data, and so somehow we've got to be able to manage and monitor the data we're collecting and provide that to our partners in our different districts around the state. So we created a dashboard which is live, and they're inspecting today. So if we were to pull it up today, you would see these numbers going up. But as they collect the data, this dashboard helps us evaluate what's out there, what they're finding, And there's a whole host of filters that we can use on this inspection app or inspection dashboard. We can filter it down to the type of terminal we're looking at, or we can filter it to a certain region of the state. We can filter it by day, by week. We can even filter it all the way down to the exact person who's doing the inspection. So if my partner, coworker Wenling, was doing some inspections and I wanted to take a look at what the work she's done, I could go in here and filter it right down to the actual person, so we can keep track, make sure that we're not running into any problems on quality with certain inspectors. And if we are, we can address those immediately so that we can have corrective action on any of those problems. Quality also goes into QA/QC of the inspections. Any of the inspections that are marked a problem or mix and match, they automatically get a desktop review by an expert, whether it's myself or one of our other partners. We developed a QA/QC desktop app that you see here that actually allows us to go in and do quality control review on any of those that are getting flagged. And we can go in and take a look at the photographs they've taken and try to pair that with the inspection report to make sure that we either agree or don't agree with their inspection. And we have ways to mark them QA/QC complete, or we can put them in another, another bucket for further action. Maybe we require them to go back in the field and re-review it.
Hey, Matt, a few more minutes, 2 or 3.
Okay, sure. So inspector training, training certified over 100 inspectors with this program. We've held workshops all over the state, and we do require the certification to work in the program. So first year outcomes, so this is actually 10 months. 10 months, we've done over 100,000 inspections. I believe it's about 105,000. A couple of key takeaways here is right now we're running about $45 per site, and we require 2-man crews. So $45 per terminal, and that's coming in way below what we had estimated. 5% deferral rate. Any sites that were deemed unsafe to access, we have them defer those. So we're looking at about 5%, and we've had many thousands of hours of exposure to traffic, and as of today, we haven't had any safety incidents in the field. So next step is just simply continue the process and get into our secondary routes. We're about halfway through that, and we seem to be well ahead of schedule. And then we're using our reporting tools, BI tools, Tableaus, and those sort of things to basically communicate to our district staff of what the problems are and where they are in those areas. And then finally, just best practices and lessons learned being shared, consolidate. We're sharing as many as we can with the districts. And then we're supporting other DOTs, as in Iowa, Wisconsin, Maryland, and several other DOTs have reached out to us. We participate in Midwest Roadside Safety Pool Fund, which is heavily guardrail research and development. And then, of course, with AASHTO, TRB, and other opportunities, we've presented our program. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Wenling and Matt. Our final presenter is Louis Feagans with the Indiana DOT. Louis is the INDOT Managing Director of System Performance and Transportation Policy. He has over 35 years of transportation experience. During his career, he has worked in asset management, hydraulics, water resources, design, scoping, and project management. He's a professional engineer with a BS from University of Evansville and an MS from Purdue University. Louis.
Thank you. So kind of building on everything that everybody's been building up to is how do we use machines? How do we use the process to improve our programs? One of the things that INDOT wanted to really do was try to find a way to minimize public interruptions to traveling public, improve getting projects on the street, and improve prices and improve getting projects out the door and selling them at the most reasonable price. So one of the things we started working with back for everyday count 6, maybe 7. Federal Highway came to us with a company that really wanted to work with the industry using machine learning. And they thought they could work with us to develop a machine learning program to bundle our projects so we could like save money on that. So a lot of people know that machine learning is a subset of AI. It uses mathematical models to kind of take samples of data and make predictions or decisions without actually being programmed to make that decision. So, I mean, it kind of learns on how, it takes the business rules that we provide and kind of creates decisions and processes out of that information. Some of the key things for us to do and how to do that is you had to have a process map, business rules of how the machine was going to learn and collect information. You had to have data points to feed the machine. You had to have clean data, consistent data, place that data in the exact same spot, every time you run the model so it knows how to collect and make decisions off of it. You had to develop a design, an algorithm to do the work, to optimize the process, optimize the mathematical model, and then you had to create dashboards and results so you could show the results of the process. Some of the key things that NDOT figured out working with FOGRO was having data governance, making sure you have rules for how you collect data, how you use data, how you maintain the data. We had to develop business rules on how we wanted to create bundles. So, did we want to do corridors? Did we want to do work types? Do we wanted to do regions? How do the unions, do we want to take account unions? Do we want to take in distance between each project? So detailed business rules for the machine to understand and to know how to collect that information. You had to have data, and then the biggest key, and you hear this a lot, you had to have staff members willing to sit down and review the results, making sure that you were getting the product that you really wanted. Some of the things that we learned about our data, sometimes we had incomplete data, we had inconsistent data. So U dot S dot or US for different routes. It had to be consistent. We had to be consistent on our X, Y locations. We had to be consistent on putting items in the correct columns and location. And one of some of the biggest challenges too is, what was a win and, what were we looking for? And like I said, getting the expert review and the confidence in the staff. This is producing the results that we wanted. Some of the other challenges, the fear of using, machine learning or AI. So one of the things that, we label what was created by the machine. We really took the time to have the staff understanding and helping us develop the process and explain the process that they used when they were doing bundling, and then us showing them how the machine was using similar or better processes to do the same product. You know, one of the concerns with using AI is, privacy and security. So we limited what data we provided the machine. Bias, it's like, well, the computer did this, so it has to be the right answer. It has to be correct. The computer can't be wrong. It's like, well, sometimes the computer can be wrong. So, taking that time to, review the results and challenge the results. And then the fear of, if we use this, you're not going to need me, and explaining it's like, look, this is just a tool to allow you to do your job easier, faster, and allow you to get out to do the things that you really want to do. as an engineer or as an asset owner, an asset manager. So I'm going to go through some key story on how NDOT used bundling. So, I'm going to show you some of the key business rules in the process, what some of the results that we've got out of it, some challenges that we still see, and some of the next steps that we are doing. So the key success for bundling that we've came up with in the business rules is, like I said, corridor. So how long of a corridor can you do? It's 0 to 10 miles, you get some points. 11 to 15 miles, you would get less points or less benefit. 16 to 20, even less. And then when you start going 20 to 30 miles, you're starting to get kind of to a negative point. Work types, 2 to 3 work types is good. 4 to 5 is even better. 6 to 7 is great. Over 7 is even, it's fantastic. This, and then, adding a negative score to, take into account, hey, if you go over 40 miles, we've talked to our contractors, the prime distance between work types, it's like 10 to 15 miles, so if you go over 40, you'll get a -6, if you go between 30 to 40, maybe a -2. And then having good data and good processes. So we use our DTIMS modeling. We've developed a 20-year plan for each asset, and you'll see the benefit of that here soon. Our interstate plan, and then life cycle planning on how you should be maintaining the assets with information that we provided to the machine to do the bundling. So what the program does, initially starts with, so we provide 600 DES numbers, 600 projects, and it will say, okay, we'll start each one as its own bundle, and then it will slowly randomly select 2 projects, put those together, compare that score to those individual scores and say, yes, it's better, or no, it's not. If it's not better, they'll break the bundle up and then pick 2 more projects. And it will keep going through that process until it develops and uses every project to make, the best bundles and the best projects possible. So one of the first things we wanted to do was we took our 21, 22, and 23 program and kind of said, okay, we've already worked, staff have created bundles. Hey, machine, what can you do? So as you can see, the machine created 221 bundles versus our 209 bundles. And I'll explain some of the differences here in a few seconds. The largest bundle that the machine created was 55 DES numbers versus 53. The average size was between 3.5 to 9 projects per bundle. Some of the rules that, the staff was the union that we didn't have initially that the machine didn't initially have that we added was adding union. So we have some pockets of the state that's heavy union. We weren't taking those into account, thus, had different bundles. So now we've added that. What trades, work types, we just had the work type, but, we didn't break it down to different trades. So we added that aspect. And then we really been wanting to do corridor bundle. So, trying to create a distance for one road bundle. So State Road 15 through this community, we're going to go in and do culverts, bridges, pavement, safety, mobility, all at one time. So we created that aspect of it as well. Some of the key items that we've, discovered that's worked really well for us, is the corridor, location, and then work types. So on the corridor bundle, some of the key things that the machine and staff have used is, comparing interstates versus non-interstate. So one of the things when we met with our contractors, and you hear me say that a lot, key thing is, meet with the contractors to see what they want to do and how they want to build stuff. So, we met with our contractors and they said, look, we've got DBEs or we're a company that doesn't like to do interstate work, or we're a company that likes to do interstate work. So, taking those in account, similar MOT process. If you can do the road work at night from 11 to 6 a.m., but the bridge work, you have to close the road, maybe those aren't a good mix. Construction time, if you're doing a thin deck overlay, that's 2 weekends versus 15 miles of payment time. That could be, a summer or maybe 2 summers, hey, let's maybe not mix those. And then they're not mixing the interstate and non-interstate. Bridges, I don't know about any other state, but historic bridges for us has always been a challenge. It always seems like at the last minute, somebody protests or something happens and that project gets put out. So, we created a thing, if it's a historical bridge, don't bundle that in. Special equipment, thin deck overlays and projects and pipeline and stuff like that, make sure you bundle those together. Painting jobs and then complex MOT, watching, like a truss bridge versus a single lane, single projects, working on that, painting projects, and then small culverts versus 3-sided culverts and sizes of like that. Road, the location of the plant, the distance between the projects, MOT conflicts, make sure you have a good lead contractor. So here's some of the results of the bundling program. As you can see, it combined about 9 projects into this bundle to get the best optimized cost. So one of the biggest keys that everybody keeps asking me, is this working? As you can see here, US 50, we did a bundle project on that. So it's 23 dozen numbers. The engineer's estimate was 2.2 million. The award price came in at 1.6. So, by combining all those projects, we were able to get a better, 27% savings. Doing 3 road resurfacing projects and a thin deck overlay. The engineer estimate as those standalone projects were 4.4 million. We ended up selling it for 3.6. So, you were seeing results. So by taking that savings, we're able to go out and do more work and do more asset improvements for the agency. Some of the key items, where it used to take us over a month to sit down, use maps, and kind of create bundles individually, we're able to do now in a week. Breaking down human barriers. So, what we used to do, we provide the information of selected program to a district or a region, and they would only design or pick projects within that region or that district. They wouldn't look across the line. So you could do 5 pipeliners on the same route in Vincennes district, and 200 feet on the other side of the district line could have been 2 more pipeliners that wouldn't have been put into the project because it was in a different district. And it's allowing us to look at some innovative bundles as well. So one of the key things that we're really wanting to do now is starting to look at a 3-year program. So right now we're bundling 2029, but we're also adding our program, or what we think our program will be for 2030 and 2031. So we're looking at 29, 30, 31 and moving projects in and out to get the most optimized bundle and the less public involvement or less public, disruption of the roads due to construction. So we don't have a road project in 29, a bridge project in 2030, and a safety project in 31. By using this program, we're going to be able to combine all 3 projects in a 1 year. And we've developed business rules that say, okay, if it's an interstate, you can move this road project 1 or 2 years, this bridge project 4 to 5 years. And, we've developed rules for that as well. And then we're looking at adding resiliency and protect aspect, equity. And then we're also starting to, do a max size bundle, saying, hey, let's do set some bundles up for some of our smaller contractors and what they can handle. So I hope this helps you see what NDOT is using machine learning and bundling to get better products out on the street, and then also improve our um, pavement and road conditions. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you to all of our presenters for taking the time to share their knowledge and experiences. If you have any questions for the presenters, you can just unmute yourself and ask, or you can put the question in the chat feature and we can read that, or you could just raise your hand and I can call on you, all of those things. So as you guys are thinking about what questions you have, if I could have all of the presenters today go on camera, and then I'll start off with a question to say, it seems to me, I have a two-part question. You can answer it in both or one of them, which is, it seems like there are a lot of advancements and opportunities related to information and systems, and as presented by all of you today. And so one is, as you look at all of the possibilities and as you've touched some of them, if you look, let's say 5 years from today, what advancements around kind of data and systems excite you the most as potentially having the biggest impact on transportation? And then the counter side of that is you all are trying to implement advancements, and what do you feel is the barrier that makes it hard for you to make greater impact in the areas you're working on? And as potentially places where attention can be placed to remove those types of barriers. Who wants to jump in?
I'll jump in first on the second question.
Mhm.
The easy answer is time, money, staffing, and process. I mean, it's amazing, how much stuff is coming and how fast things is changing with data, Power BI, machine learning, AI. I mean, it's amazing how much new tools that we are getting our fingers on. But the biggest challenge I know NDOT's having is, you know, having the time and getting that word out to everyone. Hey, we've got this new tool, let's use it. Let's build this program. Or, hey, we've got this GIS new tool. Let's get that information out there and collecting it and be consistent. But it's the time and the energy to get that product out there as fast as possible.
Yeah, I was at another meeting where someone made the comment that it's not actually money, like pure funding, but that what they thought was the biggest constraint was kind of workforce capacity to be able to do it within the agencies. So that's what it sounds like you're saying.
Very much so.
One thing that I think can help address those barriers for the workforce is good data management. And I think that that's one very, very big challenge for a lot of DOTs. We're such big organizations spanning such very disparate functions, and we all have such a dependence on other areas for information that they generate. And yet, in this sort of traditionally siloed organizations and with such complex data sets, there's a lot of challenges to just exposing and curating and sharing that information in a way that people trust it and can access it. And I know that that's where it's not necessarily radical, new sorts of ways of thinking. There's a lot of cool technologies out there that can assist in this, but I do think it's just change management. It's just this huge organizational change management challenge. And so there's technologies, these AI things that can crawl your network and help you identify and document and label and share things are really cool, but it still comes down to, a big change management challenge.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks, Will.
I
Chris?
think that to build on that, I mean, one of the things that we found in our research was in a number of the organizations we talked to, they pointed to the need to have a champion
Mhm.
to help manage that change. Because, I mean, let's face it, our processes are sticky. I mean, we have a way of doing things, and to be able to get over that hurdle of doing it another way is one thing, but also that sort of continual training and introduction of these technologies is a challenge, and you really have to have a champion who's driving that.
Mhm. Wenling or Matt? Any thoughts?
Yeah, all of the above. And also, I guess I personally have spent a lot of time working on asset, and we are data hungry, and I'm looking forward to leveraging new technology to be able to um, obtain more data more cheaper
Mhm.
compared to before. And I know there are technology out there like AI, imagery processing, LiDAR type of data collection. Um, uh, I know at the moment some of those may be still pricey, but I have faith
Mhm.
in the rate of technology evolution that maybe in the near future it will be uh, more affordable, which will make it more scalable to benefit us. So yeah, just want to always add a silver lining
Thank you.
to the vision. Yeah.
Matt, do you have something to share?
Yeah, I just echo what everybody said, and thank you, Wenling, for speaking out on VDOT's part here. I think one of the biggest challenges is just convincing executive staff to fund some of these ventures. We're just like every other DOT. We don't have endless amounts of funds, and most of those funds are spoken for year to year, and so it's always how do you slide some money from this program over to that program, and just essentially you find yourself into almost a salesman's a salesman position with your executive staff, trying to convince them that it's a good idea to move maybe a few dollars from a traditional program that's been there for a number of years into something maybe a little scary to them, or more risky to, or at least it seems that way to them. So echo every what everybody said, and that's just what I'll add to it.
Yeah, thank you all. Well, we're just at 3:30, and our next webinar will be held on October 16th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. So that's TAM Webinar 71, and we're going to focus on strategy, planning, and resource allocation. So if you're familiar with the TAM Guide chapters, it's going to be chapter 2 and chapter 5. And so more information to come on that, and you'll hear from us soon about other webinars on the schedule, and you'll be able to join us. So thank you, everyone, and thank you especially to our presenters.